So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very important master class on POSH that we are going to discuss today. And as we know that the coronavirus, it has changed and it has created many, lasting changes in the world. Of late, we have seen that companies now there's a culture, there's a concept of work from home. Many of these services they have gone online, and also employees are required to log in from their homes or from some other places other than the office environment. And the definition of workplace has totally changed now. And also, it has been seen that workplace colleagues they are interacting on social media more. The employees are coming across many tweets that their employees post. And these different layers, they increase the complexity of workplace relations. And in this context, it is very important to revisit the existing contours of sexual harassment in the workplace and how technology and current circumstances, which has been made formidable by this pandemic, they have redrawn the sexual harassment of women at workplace prevention, prohibition, and redressal act 2013. It has been to provide for an effective grievance redressal mechanism for women who have been unfortunately subjected to workplace sexual harassment. However, we observe that the fact remains that owing to the fear of having to compromise their privacy resulting in anxiety or humiliation or fear, a large section of women still continue to take a backseat when it comes to reporting incidents of workplace sexual harassment. So the objective of this POSH Act is not only to implement the effective grievance redressal mechanism, but also to create a system wherein women can feel secure and confident to file their complaints at the workplace. And while the law accomplishes that goal admirably in several different ways, confidentiality has been one of the critical elements which is normally overlooked, especially at the time of litigation. And also, we know that recently we have this ruling of the Bombay High Court, which reinforces the importance for the employers to take similar measures to ensure that the complaints are investigated and handled in a confidential manner without exposing the identities of the parties involved. So, in this context, in order to understand the nuances of this act, PhD Chamber of Commerce Industry has curated this very important masterclass, and we have a domain from Supreme Court who will dwell on various case laws and also let us all understand the nuances and nuts and bolts of this POSH Act. So without any further ado, before I request Mr. Jitendra Gupta to kindly start the deliberations with his welcome address, over to you, Mr. Gupta.
I think we lost some network there, right?
I think so. Dr. Jatinder is not on the screen right now.
So, should I start?
I think he's joining back. Just wait for a
Let's
second.
wait for him then.
I'll request Mr. Jitendra Gupta to kindly start the deliberations with his welcome address. Over to you, Mr. Gupta.
Good afternoon, everybody. And Dr. Jatinder Singh has already set the ball rolling. And I think I am standing between the the panel discussion now. Ms. Ravi Birbal is also ready to take on the session. I can only say that it's a very, very important subject. You know, it was 1997 when the Vishakha judgment came, when there was practically no law and Supreme Court had to intervene to fill the lacuna in the law. And then it took another 15 years for those Vishakha judgment to be replaced by an act which we presently now know as POSH. And also around the same time in 2013 the Criminal Act was also amended which also included various other sections like the stalking and voyeurism, etc., which so not only confining to POSH, but we also now have certain IPC sections which could also be added in addition to that. But since we are sitting in PhD from the employer side, I'm not going to go into the technical or legal aspect, but from the employer side, I can only say that first and foremost, what I still feel is missing, even in our courts. I am practicing in Supreme Court. If you go to High Court, Supreme Court, you have to look for where a committee is there. Who are the members? How to reach? So these three things are missing almost in every organization. You enter a hotel, I think this is something which should be as visible like जैसे हम कंपनी का आईएसओ लेते हैं तो हम इतने 50 साइनेज लगाते हैं. Why don't you put a signage? Who is the internal committee for this particular aspect? Who are its members? How to reach? And these communications should be sent frequently through the company communications, the newsletters, and all modes of communications, so that the intent of the employer should be clear that they are in for this act. There should be periodic seminars and awareness in this aspect. The committee should be, well constituted, probably an odd number of members, probably a suitable representation of women, and as much as possible, the perception of those people who are in the committee should not be those who are close to management or who could be there only for eye wash. They should be people who are generally acceptable. And as a mediator myself in Delhi High Court, I always say that whenever we encounter a situation where there is a complaint with the first and foremost approach should be of the conciliation or mediation. If the matter could be resolved amicably, wherein the complainant is also the issue of the complainant is also addressed, the image of the organization is also safeguarded, and some level of disciplinary action is also taken if at all it is established or it is accepted that there is some default. And there should be periodic reports, audits of these cases also. How many cases were there? How many reported? I think these are some of the things that I would say from the PhD chamber point of view. This is not the lawyer in me talking, but the co-chair of the committee talking to. And I'll leave it on Ms. Birbal to take up for the nuts and bolts from the legal aspect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for laying the foundation of this webinar. We are also joined by Mr. Ashish Bed, our co-chair of HR Committee at PhD Chamber. I request him to kindly share his views for a minute or so with the August delegates. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jitendra. It's always a pleasure to be on your programs, and Jitendra Gupta ji, my co-chair in this committee, he's always a great inspiration for us with his tremendous knowledge on the subject, and of course, dear friends. मेरी सोच, मेरा take, Jitendra, as you know, always been slightly different. ठीक है, हमारा ये सब्जेक्ट इस वक्त लीगल है और हमें उसके ऊपर चर्चा करनी है. But I am very tempted to take everybody back to what actually India was. ये कहाँ से आ गया ये सारा workplace पे sexual abuse, बाहर ladies, मतलब हम लोग अपना conduct ऐसे करना है वो एकदम भूल गए. If you go back to the mythological era, I mean, India was considered to be a country which always respected women. We have throughout the ages always been very careful, by and large, as to how we come across with them. Probably somewhere down the line, the Western culture impact has come in. My take here, like you said, कि 1 मिनट में 1.5 मिनट में जल्दी से बोल दीजिए. My take over here for now, I think we should also consider that from the early stages, we must teach the children how to conduct themselves, because these are the children who are going to become officers and who are going to become employers. So if we are careful about the conduct of the children towards the other sex, it will help us. सेल्फ डिसिप्लिन बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है। अब अगर हम अपने दफ्तरों में अपने ही ऊपर कैमरे लगा के बैठे हैं तो ये क्या मतलब है? आई हैव बीन टू सो मेनी ऑफिसेज ऑफ माय फ्रेंड्स where they say कि देखो यार आशीष, मैंने तो अपने कमरे में ही कैमरा लगा लिया। ये क्या मतलब हुआ? मतलब एक तो आप अपने बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, दूसरा ये कह रहे हैं कोई लड़की आएगी तो कहीं मेरे ऊपर गलत इल्जाम ना आके लगा दे। तो ठीक है, लीगल फ्रेमवर्क इज इम्पोर्टेंट। अब हम अपने आप को हमने यहाँ पर ले आए हैं, but I would say self-discipline, whether it is at the school level, college level, or the professional level, is very important. And I think when in our committee we must advocate that, we must try and take some experts with us to schools, to colleges, to sanitize the children about this particular. क्योंकि यार यही इन्होंने ही तो बनना है एम्प्लॉयर, और इन्होंने ही बनना है प्रोफेशनल। और इनको अगर हम अपने दिमाग में डाल दें भैया ये चीज गलत है, ये नहीं होनी है, टॉलरेट नहीं होगी। अब आप देखिए, आप इस्लाम की बात करते हैं, वहां तो हंटर मार देते हैं, तो वहां तो टॉलरेट ही नहीं होता। तो ये मेरा ख्याल था, जस्ट एन ओपनिंग रिमार्क, एंड एज वी मूव ऑन आई थिंक वी विल डेफिनेटली chip in all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving us your perspective, and you rightly said self-discipline,
जितेंद्र,
self-regulation.
आप मुझे सुन पाए थे?
जी जी, अभी yeah, I think there is some audio break from your side.
मैं कार में हूँ तो शायद इसलिए कहीं आ रहा होगा ब्रेक।
I think we can invite Ravi ji to take the workshop further. Ms. Ravi?
Yes, I'm here. I'll start then. Okay, thank you so much for.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, right. No, for the sake of understanding of all delegates, I'll just read the brief profile of our domain expert, Ms. Ravi Birbal. Ms. Birbal is the advocate in Supreme Court. She is working with Mr. Raj Birbal, senior advocate, who has a legacy over 45 years in labor and service laws. And Ms. Birbal has the super specialization about the labor laws, employment, and corporate laws. On a regular basis, she has been representing in various courts and also advises multinationals, corporates, many blue chip companies, many conglomerates, PSUs, governments, hospitals, and universities from time to time. And she has been the prodigious, she has in fact, to her credit, many prodigious number of argued and reported judgments, and also appointed as amicus curiae several times by Delhi High Court in labor and constitutional matters. And she has also been a monthly columnist with the New Indian Express from 2012 to 2017. And she has more than 80 publications in top newspapers, magazines, and journals. And she has been a regular speaker on many platforms like Delhi Legal Services Authority, Delhi Judicial Academy, Institute of Company Secretaries of India, National Commission for Women, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Also, like she has been, we have been very lucky that she has been on the panel of PhD chamber also in the past on labor related laws. She has also been a speaker in the International Bar Association, New York State Bar Association, and many reputed TV channels and organizations are reviewed. So without any further ado, I'll request our domain expert, Mr. Ravi Birbal, to kindly take over this master class. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for such a magnificent introduction. At the outset, I completely agree with Dr. Jitender ji's views, and Mr. Ashish Mohan ji's views also. I have to say that, look, we are in the 21st century, and it's so unfortunate that even today, we still have to talk about equality for women. We still have to talk about how humans need to behave. And I say that today's discussion would have utmost output if we are able to take this knowledge to the remotest parts of our country. I agree with everybody, when foreign investors come and invest in India, the first and foremost thing that they see are the ethics followed by the country. And if with discussions like this, if with awareness and implementation of laws, we are able to curtail sexual harassment disputes to a large extent, then I'm sure we'll have even more foreign investors investing in India. Now, as we all know, we have got no dearth of laws in the country. We have got several laws. But what we really lack are their implementation and their awareness. So an important law which has been promulgated by the parliament was on 9th of December 2013. That is the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at the Workplaces Act. I have made a small PPT. I'll just screen share that and let us see what this act talks about. We will also discuss the judgments that have been there pre this act and post this act. So this is the Prevention of Sexual Harassment, Prevention, Prohibition, Redressal Act 2013. And the act talks about what all constitutes as the acts of sexual harassment. First and foremost, and the most important and the most draconian one being physical contact and advances. So if they are illegitimate, unethical physical contact and advances, that would constitute as a sexual harassment. Then if there are demands or requests for sexual favors, or if there are sexually colored remarks being made. Now let me add over here, while the name of the act is sexual harassment, but if you read the preamble of the act, if you see the intention with which the act has been framed, it even talks about sexual discrimination. Now, this is something, this topic doesn't come up very often, only the topic of harassment comes up. So if the remarks are made to a woman which are sexually harassing in nature, or even if they are sexually discriminating in nature, that may also be covered by this act. Then showing pornography, if you're showing some pictures or WhatsApps, like we were talking about, we've got work from home these days, you know, or if you share something unethical on social media sites like Facebook, LinkedIn, or if you send a WhatsApp message like that, or if you're just sharing it with a woman while she's physically present in the office, that would also constitute as sexual harassment. And apart from this, the act also gives a wide definition stating that anything which is unwelcoming, whether it's physical, whether it's verbal, whether it is non-verbal, it makes the woman feel uncomfortable, then that would also constitute to be sexual harassment. So anything which is mannerless, anything which is not respectable, anything which makes the atmosphere of the work not ethical, anything which makes the woman uncomfortable, it is harassment, it is discrimination. Now, there are certain motives also that have been described in the act, such as, you know, promise of preferential treatment. If you promise a woman that, look, you do this and I am promising you a promotion, or I am promising you a salary hike, or I'll send you to a place of transfer of your choice, or I'll give you other perks, then that also comes in mens rea, a motive for sexual harassment. Then, or if you threaten her for a detrimental treatment, you say, I will demote you, I will terminate you, I will reduce your salary, I will put you below to your juniors, I will transfer you to a place which you don't like, or I will not, you know, kind of give you perks or not give you increments, then that motive can also constitute sexual harassment, provided you are asking certain sexual favors, or you're trying to harass her, or you are trying to discriminate her. Then if you threaten her about her present employment or about her future employment, like if you say, I'm going to defame you, I'm going to spoil your reputation before the board of directors, before your seniors, before your senior manager who's looking at your work, before your supervisors. Or if you tell her that I'll give you a certificate writing all kinds of nonsense about you so that you do not get the employment. Or if you threaten that I am going to wrongfully terminate you, anything of that sort, that would also constitute as mens rea, motive for sexual harassment. Otherwise, also the act says if you interfere in her normal working, like she's working in, you know, normally, and you're calling her at odd hours and not asking her to do ethical things, interfering in her general life, interfering in her normal working, or creating a very hostile environment for her, that also constitutes sexual harassment. So the act has given a very wide amplification, a very wide meaning of the term of harassment, which includes discrimination, as I said. Further, if you also humiliate her, you insult her, you treat her which is likely to affect her life, safety, her well-being, you make it impossible for her to work, and you kind of you mentally harassing her, that would also be constituted as sexual harassment. Now, not just the act has defined what is sexual harassment, the act has also laid down as to how to deal with sexual harassment. Like it was rightly said, earlier we had the Vishakha's judgment. Vishakha's judgment laid down certain parameters that if there is a complaint for sexual harassment in the company, how the company is supposed to deal with it. But the unfortunate part of Vishakha was that although it was a Supreme Court's judgment, there were no penal consequences of not following the judgment. You followed, that was an advisory of Supreme Court, that was the law of Supreme Court. But if you did not follow the guidelines, then there was nothing punitive or stigmatic that could have done on the company. Thereafter, this POSH Act came December 2013, which has laid down a procedure for inquiring into complaints of sexual harassment. So the first provision is that the act says mandatorily an organization, unless it is an exempted organization, and there are 10 or more employees, mandatorily every organization is supposed to have internal complaints committee where the woman can go and make a complaint about sexual harassment that has been caused to her. And this committee is not to be a one-member person or two-member person, and the fact that it can have just one outsider who is totally biased, no. It lays down the quorum of the committee. The act says that there will be one presiding officer who will be one of the most senior employees of the organization. 2, it says that, okay, fine, 2 more people, and 1 they say will be an outsider who will be either an NGO or a lawyer or a doctor or CA, anybody who has done women-related work is how the quorum is to be constituted. Further, the POSH Act also says that not less than half, rather majority of the quorum of that committee has to be women-oriented. So the fact of biasness, prejudice, victimization, management's own person, khana purti karna inquiry is gone after the POSH Act, because this is the quorum of ICC. It cannot be anything below that. Then these procedures, these are not defined in the act, but these come out of various pronouncements, which too I will discuss, that how do you conduct an inquiry under the POSH Act or any other domestic inquiry. So first and foremost is that the woman aggrieved has to give a complaint in writing. And yes, that complaint has to be kept confidential. Now, as soon as that complaint is given in writing, you provide a copy of the complaint to the accused person, that is the male employee against or employees against whom the complaint has been made, and let him respond to it. After he responds to it, based upon the response, if you're not satisfied, then prepare a charge sheet, a proper charge sheet defining the complete complaint, the date of the incidents, the time of the incidents. You issue him a proper charge sheet and ask for his reply. Supposing the employee does not, the accused employee or the employee's male employee does not respond to charge sheet, give him one more opportunity. He doesn't respond. Give him one more opportunity. If after 1, 2, maximum 3 opportunities, he does not respond, you come to the next step. But if he responds to it, then supposing if you are satisfied with the response, you tell the lady that, okay, this is the response he has given. Are you satisfied? If the lady says, yes, okay, fine, finish the matter, matter is gone. But if the lady says, no, I am not satisfied, there should be an inquiry, you conduct an inquiry. Then you start with the inquiry. Now in an inquiry under the ICC, principles of natural justice are to be complied with. Before I tell you what those principles of natural justice are and how you do that inquiry, let me also first tell you, the POSH Act says that before you are starting the inquiry, you try and amicably settle the disputes between the woman and the male. But that does not mean that if there's a physical assault, you try settling that. Don't do that. It means if supposing it was just merely verbal, out of anger, out of excitement, out of aggression, out of some work pressure, such kind of disputes you may try and settle. If it's settled, the matter is over. No need to proceed with the inquiry. Simply give a report. The matter is finished. But if the charge is grave in nature, or if the settlement is not taking place, then you start with the inquiry. In the inquiry, you first call the woman or the accused employee and you ask him to lay down their complaint or their defense. And then both sides, most importantly, you may please note, because without this, your inquiry would be null and void in law, that give both the parties an opportunity to cross-examine each other. Supposing if the man is getting a witness in his favor that, look, my conduct is so good, or look, what the lady is saying is wrong, because that day I was with him and this is what happened, and he will depose in my favor or she will depose in my favor. Or if the lady brings a witness in her favor, if she has got, even if she doesn't have, no problem. But if she's getting a witness in my favor that, look, after this incident happened, I told him, I told her, or he was present, she was present, or you can ask so and so people that this person has been misbehaving with them as well. So all those witnesses, the lady complainant or the lady's complainant or the male accused, his witnesses, there has to be ample opportunity of cross-examination. You may also lay down one more principle, that you also have to give a defense representative to the accused male employee. So if the accused male employee says that I want to get somebody who, not a lawyer, I mean lawyer is to be allowed in his favor as a defense representative only if the rules say so. But if the rules don't say, then you can allow the accused employee to get any other co-employee in his favor who can help him represent his case. That opportunity also has to be given. That is one principle. Another principle you may note, that if supposing somebody is a workman level employee or a lower category employee and he is not very conversant with English language, and he says that the inquiry should be done in Hindi or the local language of that particular state, then according to the judgments, that should also be allowed by the management. Then furthermore, few more principles you may lay down. It is important that on every date of inquiry, the copy of the proceeding is sent to the accused, or if you are not comfortable in sending the proceeding, then you must take the accused signature and the complainant signature on every proceeding. Now, supposing if during the inquiry, the accused is not present on some of the dates or complainant is not present on some of the dates, I will be sharing judgments on that respect. We advise that for that date, you may speed post or send by registered post as well as by email, or now even WhatsApp. Though WhatsApp we avoid, by email or by speed post or registered post, a copy of the proceeding of that day, and give him or her one more opportunity to appear in the inquiry. If still they do not appear, give one more opportunity. Like this, give 2 to 3 opportunities, so that tomorrow if the inquiry is challenged in court, you can validly say that principles of natural justice were complied with. Thereafter, if the still accused does not appear or the complainant does not appear, you proceed with the inquiry. But if they appear, give them both ample opportunity to bring as much as evidence they want, ample opportunity to cross-examination each other. Now, after the cross-examination is done, the complaints have come, the hearsay evidence has come, the oral evidence has come, the documentary evidence, whatever evidence it is done, the inquiry part is complete, and then the committee frames a report which is known as an inquiry report. Now, when you give that report, you lay down this witness said this witness said this, and you only give your findings. You do not impose the action. You only give your finding that this is what the quorum's finding is after examining the evidences and the cross-examination laid down by the complainant and laid down by the accused people. Now, after in that inquiry, you do not impose the punishment, as I said, but you can always recommend some action which is to be taken by the disciplinary authority. Now, after this report is complete, the procedure is still not complete. You need to give something which is called as a show cause notice, and some people also term it as a second show cause notice when they have given a charge sheet at the first place. So with this show cause notice, it is very imperative. You may please note down, because many managements miss taking this step. So with this show cause notice, you annex the copy of the inquiry report and ask for explanation from the accused man if the charges stand proved. As well as, very importantly, you may note, in that show cause notice, you also suggest the penalty that, look, we find the charges to be grave, so we decide to dismiss you, or we found the charges to be so we decide to demote you, etc. Do state the penalty also therein, and give opportunity to the accused male to reply to that show cause notice, to reply to the inquiry report. Supposing you give him 72 hours, he does not reply, give him some more time, give him a week's time more, he does not reply, give him one more time. So like this, give maximum 2 to 3 opportunities, and thereafter when he responds to it, supposing let's say he does not respond to it, then you take an action. But if he responds to it, then thereafter, if you are satisfied with the response, you may place the matter before a higher authority, or say that, okay, fine, you are satisfied with the response and you do not want to take any action. But if you are not satisfied with the response, you can just send him 2-line letter that we gave you the show cause notice, this inquiry was conducted, we gave you a copy of the report, we are not satisfied with the response that we have given, and therefore we decide to take this disciplinary action, and so we are taking the disciplinary action against you. Now this is the procedure, right from giving the charge sheet to starting of the inquiry, to giving a show cause notice, and to giving a disciplinary action letter. The procedure is still here, not complete. Some companies also have a provision for appeal, which I as a lawyer generally advise that there should be a procedure for appeal also. So if you have a procedure for appeal in the disciplinary action letter or otherwise, you can always communicate to the accused employee that you can also appeal against the decision. Now, supposing the accused appeals against the decision, the appeal authority has to give a detailed order, preferably. If the appeal authority is agreeable to the action taken by the disciplinary authority and not convinced by the appeal filed by the accused person, it will simply say at the end of it that we are not convinced with the appeal, we are convinced with the decision of the disciplinary authority, and we reiterate the penalty. But if the appeal authority is not convinced with the disciplinary authority's decision and it is convinced with the appeal, then the appeal authority has to give what the Supreme Court has said, a reason known as tentative reasons for disagreement. If the appeal authority says that we are not agreeable with the decision of the disciplinary authority, then following are the reasons because of which we do not agree, and this is what we need to do against you, is how the appeal authority has to deal with it. Now, thereafter, what are the powers of internal complaint committee during this inquiry? First of all, I said that no, the ICC committee does not have power to impose disciplinary action. It can only recommend a disciplinary action. However, during the course of the inquiry, if the ICC wants, it can recommend to management to transfer the woman or the accused male employee to another place or to another branch or to another floor, or to have a separate seat, so that it's comfortable for the man also, it's comfortable for the woman also. ICC also has the power to grant leave to the woman for a certain period if she is mentally disturbed, and that will be a paid leave. And this leave is not to be adjusted in the leaves that are being granted under the Shops and Establishments Act or the Factories Act or the Maternity Benefit Act. It has to be separate from those. Then of course, if any other relief also can be granted by ICC to the woman, that is, things like work from home, change of department, change of place, etc. These are the powers of the ICC committee. This is done during the pendency of the inquiry. Then further, after the inquiry is complete, like I said, the report has to be given. I would also want to mention one more thing over here. Supposing if the inquiry committee comes to a finding that the complaint by the woman was malicious, it was made with malafide intentions, in such a case also, ICC committee can recommend an action against the women employees. So women should also be careful that their complaints should not be false, fabricated, made out of anger or out of some other motive. But I would like to add something very important here, that if the complainant has not been able to prove the charges, if there was no witness in her favor, that would not mean that the complaint was malicious. It has to be proved by cogent evidence that the complaint was malicious. Merely non-proving of the charges would not mean the woman had some mala fide intentions. It has to be proved by the accused. There has to be a specific finding of the inquiry committee that the woman made a mala fide complaint. Now let us see next step. This was about inquiry and the recommendation by the ICC and what ICC can do during the pendency of the inquiry. Now let us see disciplinary actions. What all disciplinary actions can be taken? Now this disciplinary action, first of all, as I have repeated several times, is not to be done by ICC but by the disciplinary committee of the management. So first action, first and foremost, which is generally taken in grave cases of sexual harassment like a physical assault, even a verbal abuse, even showing pornography, would be dismissal. Normally dismissal is done, the person is sacked. There is a punitive, you can note the word punitive, stigmatic termination letter which is being given. Other penalties could be removal, that you don't make the termination stigmatic, that you do not make it punitive, and you simply 2-line letter say that okay fine, we are removing you. Further, if you think that the sexual harassment was there but it was not so grave, like there was a message, there was a casual WhatsApp exchange, or there was some comment made, but the person had otherwise had a good career of 10-20 years or 5 years or 8 years, and he has been doing well, there haven't been complaints against him in the past, then probably you can give him a very strict warning. Along with that, you can lower his increment, you can give him stagnation, you can demote him, depending upon what the gravity of misconduct is, the person's past is. Depending upon such conditions, you take a disciplinary action. That is the first. Second, also, apart from a dismissal or removal or a disciplinary action, there is one more thing which can be done, which is reduction from salary of the male employee and give it to the female employee as a compensation. Normally companies don't do it, but this power is also there in the POSH Act, that okay fine, apart from the disciplinary action, you take a part of the salary, like whatever money you feel, according to the hurt that has been caused to women, according to the the loss she has faced, loss in career, or the mental trauma she has faced, or the income financial status according to which she has faced a loss, that amount can also be given to the woman. Then further, if the woman says, or you yourself want to take a criminal action, then you may even go and take a criminal action. If the woman says that you take a criminal action, company cannot say no. As per POSH Act, mandatorily support has to be given right from the stage of FIR till the end result. Support has to be there of the company in taking the criminal action against the male employee. Then, like I already said, that if the complaint is malicious by the woman, and if it is proved, merely fact that woman could not prove the complaint would not mean it is malicious. If it is proved the lady was malicious in nature, mala fide in nature, action can be, same actions can be there against the lady also. Now, before I come to other important points, let me also tell you, because these kind of questions also come to us as lawyers, that who all would be the employees covered under POSH Act. So every kind of employee, whether he's a regular employee, he's a probationer, he's a contractual employee. I'm not saying contract labor. Contract labor would also be covered if the misconduct has happened at the premises of the principal employer. Contractual employee, fixed term employee, daily wager, temporary wager, casual employee, any kind of employee would be covered by the POSH Act, and action has to be taken against the male employee. So every employee would be covered. Even if it is a contract labor, the action has taken place at the premises of the principal employer. There has to be an action because the premises were there of the principal employer. Now, another question which comes to us very often is, what if something has taken place which is outside the premises, which has not happened at the premises, which is outside the working hours also? So normally people say, no, because it was outside the working hours, it was not there in the premises, so why should we bother about it? But there's a judgment of Honorable Supreme Court. although that was prior to coming of the POSH Act. It talked about normal disciplinary actions. However, according to that judgment by the name of Moolchandani Radio, that if something has taken place outside the premises of management also, but because there is an employer-employee relationship involved, then in such a case also the management has to take an action. Supposing if some male employee, senior employee, messages to women 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, of course they are not there at the premises. Of course, those may not be the working hours, but because there is an employer-employee relationship and he has misused that relationship, messaged her late at night, not regarding work, but something casual or irrelevant, or something which is not irrelevant, I would say something which is not proper, something which is not appropriate, something which constitutes harassment. In such a case also, even though it was not there at the workplace, even though it was beyond the working hours, still the action can be taken. ICC can take cognizance of it and do an inquiry and take disciplinary action by the disciplinary authority. Now, furthermore important points and compliances under the POSH Act. One is that submission of annual report, that every company after coming of the POSH Act mandatorily in the annual reports has to give as to what all sexual harassment incidents were there and what actions they have taken. Now that is a good way of keeping a control on the companies, that every company has to kind of lay down in the annual report. Then very important, as everybody was talking about the Bombay High Court decision, apart from other things what was said, the decisions of the inquiry have to be kept very confidential. They cannot be made public. They cannot be shared. And in fact, Bombay High Court, although it has not relied on the provisions of POSH Act, but Bombay High Court has also said that if there will be some cases filed in Bombay courts with respect to sexual harassment, then the name of the complainant and the name of the male, the accused, will be kept confidential. The POSH Act also says that the names have to be kept confidential and the details of the accused and the victim cannot be shared. Then decisions of the ICC, these also cannot be published. Like we have got judgments, etc. They are published. Decisions of ICC are not to be published. They are not to be shown to public, not even to the other employees. Then one more aspect, you may note that you are not supposed to say constitute and have the same ICC for years together. You can have this particular ICC maximum for 3 years, and after 3 years, you change the ICC. So every 3 years, you need to shuffle the members of the ICC. You cannot have the same ICC always. Then further, duties of the employers have been laid down in the POSH Act. One, of course, is that very usual, that provide for safe working conditions and environment. Then secondly, like I said, if the woman wants to institute a criminal action under Indian Penal Code, IPC, the employer has to help her. Then employer also at a conspicuous place have the laws with respect to women laid down, like on the notice board or like on the intra board, which is available on the website of the company or on the emails of the employees. Then more very importantly, there must be a policy in place. Many managements lack it. It is very important that you have a prevention of sexual harassment committee, a policy in place. Then you need to provide facilities to the ICC. Then further, you need to have a code of conduct and also provide for disciplinary actions. You know, these are the duties, although laid down under the Act, but it is my personal suggestion, if you will have a proper policy, if you will have a proper policy stipulating the disciplinary actions, and you will ensure all the male and the female employees have read it, they have read about how the inquiry is to be conducted. On its own, there will be some kind of deterrent in your organization. On its own, the sexual harassment incidences will start reducing. Then further, you also have to monitor timely submissions of report by ICC. Then apart from this, some general advisory also, that there are exemptions available in various parts of the country now. And as you all know, this new Labor Codes 2020, which stands, which has received the President nod, it has been passed by both the Houses of Parliament. That may soon get implemented, according to which women, even in the remotest parts of the country, can work for late nights. And before coming of this code, that is right now, currently, there are exemptions wherein women can be made to work for late night, provided there are exemptions under Shops and Establishments Act, Factories Act. So if there are exemptions available, if you are making the women folk work late nights, then you must ensure that you give them a proper transportation. You must must ensure that whether you're making them work in day or night, any woman employee, any male employee, you have taken details of their parents, their guardians, their permanent addresses, their residential addresses, the phone numbers of the parents, the phone numbers of the guardians. And also you must ensure that there is no woman who is singularly at late night working alone in the organization. Now, like we discussed earlier, prior to coming of the POSH Act, you had the judgment of Vishakha. Non-compliance of Vishakha meant nothing. There were no punitive or penal consequences. But if you do not have an ICC in place, if you do not submit your annual report, if you are not making any compliance which has been given under the POSH Act, then there are very serious consequences. One is fine up to 50,000 rupees. Now, this may not sound very serious. Second is that, okay, if you repeat the offense, then double amount. This also you may not find very serious. Third is the most serious one. If you do not make POSH Act compliances, if you do not have an ICC in place, if you're not submitting your annual reports, your registration, your license for working of that establishment can be cancelled. Now, this is very serious. So if you do not follow POSH Act, the Act provisions, your license can be withdrawn, it can be cancelled. Then you need to go apologize, plead guilty, and then get your license back. Now, this was about the POSH Act. Now, let us look at the important judgments, because Dr. Jitendra and Jitendra ji both emphasized that we must look at the judgments and the case laws on the subject matter. So first was the Vishakha, which we just talked about, which was in 1997 of Supreme Court. After this, we have got the POSH Act. Now, another important judgment of Honorable Supreme Court, which you may note, is State of Haryana versus Ratan Singh. This judgment talks about that, how an inquiry is to be conducted and to what extent the court can interfere in the inquiry. Supposing there is a full-fledged inquiry which has been done under POSH Act by the ICC, and the report of that inquiry is challenged in the court of law. How much can the court interfere is what that judgment has said. The judgment says that in a domestic inquiry, sophisticated rules of evidence are not applicable. What the inquiry committee has to what the court really has to see first, that whether principles of natural justice were complied with by the inquiry committee. Therefore, first thing I said was that you must see that both parties get to lead the evidence. Both parties are given a copy of the charge sheet. Both parties are given a opportunity of cross-examination each other. So principles of natural justice are to be complied with or not. That bit is what court can see. If principles of natural justice are not complied with, court can set aside the inquiry. But if principles of natural justice have been complied with, then court cannot interfere into decisions of inquiry committee. It can interfere. It can interfere only if the view taken by the inquiry committee was totally perverse. For example, evidence was something, but the result was something else. Evidence was something, the conclusion which has come, they don't relate at all. Only in such a circumstance, the court can interfere, or if it was a case of no evidence. Supposing the inquiry committee says there is no evidence, still we hold the employee guilty, or there is no evidence, still we hold the lady guilty. In such a circumstance, court may interfere. But if there are two views coming possible, inquiry committee has a certain view and the court has a certain view. The court cannot replace its view with the view of the inquiry committee. The view of the inquiry committee will be upheld. So principles of natural justice have been complied with by the ICC or not, that is more important. And that the finding of the committee of the ICC, that should not be totally contrary, totally perverse to the evidence laid down, and it should not be a case of absolutely nil evidence, absolutely no evidence. Now here I may add, although I have not written the name of the judgment, there was one judgment of J.D. Jain of Honorable Supreme Court which said in inquiry even hearsay evidence is permissible. There may not be documentary proof, there may not be physical proof, there may not be oral proof. Only if somebody says, "Haan, humne to suna tha." So even hearsay evidence is permissible in inquiry, because it is not a criminal action that we are taking. It is a disciplinary action we are taking. There is a difference in how criminal proceedings happen in court. There's a difference in how disciplinary action are taken. So disciplinary action inquiry is not to be seen where there is proof of guilt beyond reasonable doubt. When you're giving a criminal penalty, when you're imposing a criminal penalty like phansi, jail, or something by a criminal court, over there, you know, the dispute, the guilt has to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. But the principle which is to be applied in doing disciplinary inquiries are preponderance of probability, not proof beyond reasonable doubt. You need to see whether this was the probability, whether this was a probable conclusion. Only to that extent court can see, and only to that extent the inquiry committee has to see, not a proof beyond reasonable doubt. Then even Balamadi's estate judgment of Honorable Supreme Court too said that the dispute, the domestic inquiry, the guilt is not to be established beyond reasonable doubt. All materials which are probative and which are attracted to a logical mind, that will be taken cognizance of. Similarly, the Cholan Broadway Supreme Court said that, you know, a prima facie case has to be seen in domestic inquiry. It need not be proved to held. If by the principles of preponderance of probability, the charge is proved, then the charge is proved. You need not prove it beyond the reasonable doubt. Now, second principles that have been laid down by Honorable Supreme Court is that, supposing in the domestic inquiry, you have given ample number of opportunities, like I said earlier, to the guilty male employee, to the accused employee to come and appear, and he does not appear. You have given him 1, 2, 3 opportunities. He has received the notices. Still, he chooses not to appear before the inquiry committee. Then inquiry committee may proceed. It need not wait infinitely for the accused employee to appear. However, Supreme Court in a subsequent judgment has also said in 2013, State Bank of India versus Narendra Pandey, that even if it is an ex parte inquiry. What is ex parte inquiry? That if the accused person or any other party is not appearing. Even in an ex parte inquiry, some element of proof should be there that satisfies that, okay, fine, yeah, the guilt may have been committed. Then further, again, Supreme Court in Bank of India, Apoorv Saha has said that employee who refuses to appear in the inquiry despite having given sufficient number of opportunities, inquiry can having ex parte. Here I may advise you that you must ensure that the notice you are sending to the employee have been received by him. So you must send it by speed post, registered post, as well as via email, and oral communication will not do. And when you are sending him the communication, there should be some gap between the communication date of the communication and the next date of the inquiry. It should not be that today 12 o'clock you've given the communication and you are holding the inquiry just after 1 hour at 1 o'clock. So some kind of gap should be there so that tomorrow the employee does not go to court and say that, look, I was not given sufficient opportunity. Now, another very important judgment of Honorable Supreme Court is biasness. Supposing tomorrow the ex-employee starts saying, the dismissed employee or from whoever you've taken the action starts saying that, look, the inquiry committee was biased. So Supreme Court has taken care of that also. Supreme Court says that, look, mere allegation of biasness will not do. You come and prove biasness. You show how the inquiry committee was mala fide. You show how it was biased. Only then there will be biasness. Merely saying it was biased will not happen. He will have to show how the inquiry committee was personally against him or her, how it was personally prejudiced against him or her. If he is not able to show that prejudice, not able to show that biasness, that will not happen. And Supreme Court has also said, if inquiry officer is some paid professional, of course, under ICC committee, we have got the committee constituted, like I said earlier. So if even if the outside person that you're involving, the outside member, he's a paid professional or she is a paid professional, that would not mean the inquiry committee is biased. Now, next important judgment of Honorable Supreme Court. Now, this is a very celebrated judgment, and this is often an argument of the employees against whom actions have been taken, that we have been victimized. Many say I was a member of the union. मैं तो union leader था तो मेरे against action हुआ. Or somebody may say no, the board of directors are different. They are new board of directors. They don't like me. They wanted me to be sacked. So I'm making an allegation against everybody. So Supreme Court in the celebrated judgment of Bengal Bhardi has said that mere allegation of victimization will not do. You cannot say that somebody was biased against me, somebody has victimized me, I am a union leader, it's a new management, they are against me, they want their own politics. No, you will have to prove that how being a union leader you have been prejudiced, or how the new management is against you. Everything will have to be proved. Mere allegation will not do. Then further, another, like I said earlier, sometimes managements do a mistake. Sometimes management do the mistake of not giving the second show cause notice or not providing a copy of the inquiry report. Now, although in POSH Act, it is mandatory that the inquiry report is given to the accused person. The Act specifically states that. However, there are still, if supposing you have done the mistake, right? You've done the mistake. We have crossed the river, we have crossed the bridge, and that mistake is there. How do we tackle it? So there is this judgment of Honorable Supreme Court, very interesting. And also there is this judgment of management. First is Union of India versus Vishwa Mohan, and next is ECIL Karnakaran 5 to the Supreme Court. These state that, okay, fine, supposing if inquiry report has not been given or show cause has not been given, then the employee will have to show that what prejudice has been caused to him that the second show cause was not given. There was a charge sheet. He has replied to it. There's a full-fledged inquiry. The charges stand proved. Okay, fine. A formality of second show cause notice is not there. So what? Show what prejudice has been caused. And second judgment, Karnakaran says that, okay, fine. You've not given the show cause notice. Give it now. Give it now and start the inquiry, restart the inquiry from that stage. So your inquiry is not set aside. Your charge sheet is not set aside. You've given the charge sheet, a reply has been called for, there is a full-fledged inquiry, you have a view in your mind, now give him a show cause notice and now let him respond to it. And when you are giving him that show cause notice, during that period, should that terminated person be reinstated in the employment or not? Should he be given back wages from the date he was terminated till today? Now you give him show cause or not? That is something the management will decide. Supreme Court has taken care of it. So it's my first and foremost advice that you must give a show cause notice. You must give an inquiry report. And even in POSH Act, even more you must give it. But supposing mistakenly you have not done it, first ask the employee in court that he must tell what prejudice has been caused, and second say, okay, fine, we will give him show cause notice now. The inquiry may begin from this stage of giving the show cause notice. Let him reply and we will see what action is to be taken, whether our view gets different by his reply to show cause notice or not. So this was about how an inquiry is seen by court, how much interference can be done, how much principles of natural justice are to be applied, then what happens in show cause. Now the last step is interference in penalty. Supposing you have done a very proper inquiry and you have imposed a penalty, you have given the show cause notice, etc. also. So how much can the labor court or the writ court or the civil court, wherever the case has gone to, as per the appropriate jurisdiction, the court can interfere in the penalty. So Bharat Forge judgment of Honorable Supreme Court said that once an employee has committed a misconduct, then the labor court or the writ court or any other court, it cannot substitute its view. According to Supreme Court, the management is the best judge of the employee. The management has to see its administrative decisions. Management needs to see whether it is good to have the employee back, it is not good to have the employee back. Court should ideally not replace its view with the view of the management. Of course, if the penalty is shockingly disproportionate, if it was just that a man goes and sits beside a woman and just lays its hand like this or elbow like this and you dismiss him and the court says this was shockingly disproportionate, the court may substitute its view. But normally Supreme Court has said that courts should not interfere within a penalty, because that is the domain, that is the discretion of the management. Court should not enter into shoes of the administration. Another judgment of Honorable Supreme Court is that the courts should not give views based on sympathy and generosity. It is for the management to see. The reliefs granted by the courts should be logical and applicable and appealable to a prudent mind. It should not be placed on misplaced sympathy. कोई कोर्ट में गया और रोना शुरू कर दिया, नहीं. Management's decision will be final. Court should not grant any relief just based on sympathy. Then further, another very important judgment, and this is on sexual harassment. This was Apparel Export Promotion versus A.K. Chopra by Honorable Supreme Court. Here, Supreme Court says that, if there is an act of sexual harassment against a woman, that is contravention of the fundamental right to life, liberty, and equality. Supreme Court has said no lenient action is to be taken. No sympathy has to be shown in such cases. So Supreme Court has made it clear that if there is a serious misconduct of sexual harassment, definitely penalty of dismissal must be, imposed upon the accused male employee. Then second very interesting case, this was of High Court, was Dharmender versus Union of India. Here, there was a minor penalty imposed on the male employee. And, there was also transfer of the male employee. The minor penalty was imposed because there was some video he had shared. And it was the view of the court that, okay, fine, video sharing is bad, but there is nothing very objectionable in the video. That was the view of the inquiry committee and the court, etc., etc. So a minor penalty was imposed. Now, along with imposition of minor penalty, interestingly, the male employee was also transferred to another place. So the male employee went to court and said that, look, I have been imposed this minor penalty and I have also been transferred to another location. Now, this is a double jeopardy. Double jeopardy means double penalty. You have imposed a penalty also and you have also transferred me. Court said, okay, fine, there's a minor penalty, but if you have transferred you to another place, that is for your comfort and the woman's comfort. It is not a punishment. It is not double jeopardy. So you also in your organizations, if you want to impose a penalty, a minor penalty, you're not terminating the person. At the same time, you can transfer him to another location. That will not constitute double jeopardy, provided that transfer has been done in good faith and it is not an act of victimization. Then another judgment of Delhi High Court on sexual harassment. Again, all these judgments, Apparel Export, Dharmender, Samriddhi, Vishakha, they are all on sexual harassment. They says if it's a case of molestation of a woman employee, then nothing less than dismissal. There has to be a very strict view. No sympathy has to be shown. And that procedure of CCS, this was a case of government, procedure of CCA and CCS. CCS are Central Civil Services rules, have to be followed while conducting the inquiry and while taking the action against the male employee. Now, another important judgment, a very important judgment, and this we often use, is filthy language. So if supposing some male person has used filthy language, or even if a female has used filthy language against a male employee, against a female employee, and you terminate that person because of use of filthy. Minded, word is filthy, not rude. Rude is different. Filthy language in the organization, abusive language in the organization. In such a case, if you terminate the male employee or even a female employee, Supreme Court has said that constitutes as a very serious misconduct. If it was a case of filthy language, abusive language in the organization, that will not be tolerated, and the penalty of dismissal was held to be appropriate, even if the language has been used only once. Now, one very important judgment which you may note down, and this you may note down as a thumb rule for any misconduct, most importantly sexual harassment also, is Abhay Raj Jaiswal versus Godrej and Boys. Apparently, this was argued by myself. I was representing Godrej and Boys, and we won this case right till Supreme Court. So Supreme Court said that if you have got loss of confidence, you feel this person has done some financial bungling, or this person has done sexual harassment, his act constitutes a violation of, the ethics of the management. It's a moral turpitude act. In such a case, in every penalty letter, note the golden words I'm telling you: loss of confidence. In penalty letter, you can say there was loss of confidence against you. The moment you say there's loss of confidence against the employee, no court will ever interfere in your penalty of dismissal, because the Supreme Court, the Delhi High Court, Supreme Court, that was Air India Rubello. This judgment that I'm just showing you, Rubello also said that if it's a bona fide loss of confidence and the employer has terminated, the courts cannot substitute their view. The courts are not supposed to grant reinstatement to the employee. So if you think the misconduct is serious, like, against a woman employee, there is moral turpitude, he is not good with the woman, you can include the words loss of confidence very validly in your termination letter. In such a case, your dismissal of penalty will not be set aside. So this was about POSH Act. It has come since 2013. But like I said earlier, that if we really want to achieve the purpose of this POSH Act, merely, implementing it in the metropolitan cities or in the multinational blue chips, that will not solve the purpose. If we really want to do something for the company you're working at, for the country, for the economics, for attracting the foreign investments, if we really want ethics and law to prevail in the country, we must take this knowledge and we must have provisions of this act implemented in the remotest part of the country, whether it's construction sector, factories, small scale industries, village industries, everywhere. Spread knowledge of this. Thank you.
Great. In fact, thank you, Ms. Ravi Bittal, for such a wonderful session. And you have, in fact, discussed all details of POSH Act, and with many judgments, you have given a clear indication that where it is applied, where it is not applied, what are the penal provisions, and how this can be tackled if at all, if there is any new issue or some new idea or some sort of a new harassment that is never being thought of. Now the time has come for questions. We can take questions from our audience, and if you see our Q&A session, there is one question. It says by Pankaj Srivastava: my company engages TCS or Infosys as IT vendor and contractor. If their employees does any sexual harassment with our female employees, then which IC will have to be approached by female employee, ours or vendors? Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's a very interesting question. Like I was talking about the contract labor, although you may argue over here that this is not contract labor system. Before answering your sexual harassment case, let me tell you one judgment of Honorable Supreme Court, Steel Authority of India. I also remember the citation. If it is 2001, volume 7, SCC, page 1, which says that whether it is contract of service or contract for service, it is contract labor. In nutshell, the judgment says that, okay, if there is the normal understanding is that if there are people working through a third party outsourced agency or TCS imposes by whatever name they may be, if for 8 to 10 hours every day they are working at your premises, maybe that is a contract labor system, but as a principal employer, you are responsible for many things. Now here, to this particular question of yours, my suggestion would be, to safeguard yourself, it will be nice if you can have the contractor conduct the inquiry, like the TCS or the Infosys conduct the inquiry. But if the male employee was from your organization, right, and the female is from their organization, in such a case, you will need to conduct the inquiry because the male employee is from your organization. However, if the male employee is from their organization, then you can always ask them to conduct the inquiry. However, your person will also need to be present in the inquiry. So it all depends where the male employee is from. If male employee is from you conduct. Premises yours, you conduct. Male employee theirs, they conduct. Male employee is there, but premises yours, then also you conduct. And if they are conducting, your person should also be present. And if there's a confusion that you know how you should go about it, best is let both parties be present. Let principal employer be also present, let contractor also be present.
Thank you. In fact, there's a question, ma'am, from my side. So what is the mechanism for this annual report and what has to be the contents of the annual report?
In the annual report, you need to report as to how many incidences of sexual harassment have taken place, one, and what actions you have taken. Supposing there is no incident, you write nil incident. Many companies I work for, they don't have incidences, they write nil incident. But the column has to be filled. However, if there have been incidents, you say 1 incident, 2 incidents, 3 incidents, and this is the action taken. Report must go even if it is nil.
Okay. There's a question from Mr. Nakib Alam. The law assumes that only male can cause harassment to females. Means, yeah.
See, if you read the Posh Act, you know, this is, yes, you're right. This is, it says that the sexual harassment of women at workplaces, you are right. Well, okay, fine. You may, I mean, although, like I said earlier, there is a provision which says if a woman has filed a malicious complaint, the complaint is mala fide. In such a case, there can be action against the woman also. That is first part of the question's answer. The second part of it is that supposing there's a woman who's harassing you, and it happens, if it is a woman senior employee who's harassing you or some junior who's harassing you, maybe you cannot make a complaint under Posh Act, although there are companies which say that no, by virtue of, you know, there is this provision in law, General Clauses Act. General Clauses Act says he and she will be used together. So even if you're not doing the inquiry for a male employee under the Posh Act, you can have a separate inquiry committee and look into the charges, whatever allegation. So it does not mean, Posh Act does not mean there is no law for the men. It does not mean that. It just means that atrocities against the women were more. So there's a law framed for them. If you as a male is facing problem, you can make a complaint to Posh Act committee. The Posh Act committee can take cognizance of it. Or if the Posh Act committee is not taking cognizance of it, there can be a separate domestic inquiry. But yes, the woman will also not go scot-free if there is a harassment against male. The act does not mean an estoppel that male employees cannot make a complaint. That does not mean there is no law for the men.
Yes, thank you. There's a question from Ms. Rakhi Budhiraja. Where to file a complaint if any organization...
Rakhi is a fellow lawyer. Hi, Rakhi. I've been reading your messages.
Okay.
Yes. What's the question?
So the question is where to file a complaint. Let Ms. Rakhi pose question on her own because she has raised hand. Just a second.
Okay.
I'll just promote her.
Okay, there is one thing I would want to add to Pankaj's question. Pankaj's question, I just read, it says companies engages TCS Infosys, and if their employee does any sexual harassment with our female employee, right? So if it's their male employee who's doing a sexual harassment, then first it will be done by them for this particular question. However, because the act says you are supposed to assist the woman, right? So even your company would be involved in assisting the woman. And if supposing the TCS or the Infosys is not doing the inquiry, then straight away you can tell TCS Infosys that, look, this was the problem. You have not done the inquiry. You must ensure this person does not come at our organization from tomorrow. This bit you can do, one. And second, if the woman wants to take a criminal action, then your company will have to help the woman take criminal action against the employee. You may not be able to do the inquiry, but you can tell the company, go with the woman, help her in the inquiry. And if the company still does not do the inquiry, then you say we'll make a complaint to government, to the labor department or to appropriate court. And in the meantime, from tomorrow, the male, so-and-so male employee from your company will not come and enter our premises. Secondly, you can also tell them very straightforwardly that if you do not take cognizance of the woman employee working with us, then we will not do business with you. As straightforward as that.
So we have Ms. Rakhi. Yeah, ma'am, please go ahead with your question. Ms. Rakhi Budhiraja.
Yes, good afternoon to everyone. Hello, Ravi. First of all, I would like to thank you for such a nice and a knowledgeable session.
Thank you.
Ravi, actually, I missed two judgments which I had already mentioned in the chat box. Please send me those name of those judgments. And my question was that if any organization having more than 10 employees or members, even after having the knowledge that a post committee is mandatory, but doesn't create the committee knowingly, then where to file the complaint against them?
To the district officer. They are district officers that have been laid down. Wherever companies are not having ICC, it does not mean that women does not have a remedy. Apart from ICC, there is also provision for having a district level committee in each district. So one can go and file a complaint for sexual harassment before the district committee, and a complaint against the management for not having an ICC. Two things can be done. One, with the local complaint committee, the district committee that I just referred to, where we can go and file a complaint for sexual harassment. We can also tell them that this company is working in your area and there is no ICC. Second, you can also make a complaint to the concerned labor department to cancel their license under Shops and Establishments Act or Factories Act, wherever the company is registered, not to carry on with the work because they are not having ICC in place. So two places, the local complaint committee, that is the district committee, which is apart from ICC, and the local labor department of that district.
Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question from Mr. Ashish Mohan Big. What about sexual abuse of lady worker or maid who is working at a house, which is also workplace for her?
Yes, sir. Very good question and very important also. और यही मैं बोलना चाह रही थी. Like Dr. Ashish Mohan Big sir also said initially that we need to change people from inside and we need to carry this thing everywhere. Domestic लोगों को अगर हम नहीं देखेंगे, then we are not doing justice. For a domestic worker also, the act covers them, and they say the complaint can be made to the district committee, the local complaint committee. ICC is for companies with 10 or more employees, but wherever there are less than 10 employees, or wherever shops, establishments, industrial law, Factories Act, ID Act, Contract Labor Act, Minimum Wages Act, PF Act, ESI, gratuity, bonus are not applicable, they are domestic. Maybe labor laws do not cover them, but the POSH Act covers them, and a complaint can be made to the district committee, the local complaint committee. The right nomenclature is local complaint committee.
There are, I think, no questions. We can have the last question. Anybody having any important question in your mind, please put in the chat box, or you can directly ask to our expert. Okay. So, there's a question by Ms. Kanchan Joshi. In fact, she is a member of ICA, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In case there are different offices of the same organization, then how many committees need to be constituted, or same committees at headquarters? It can work. For example, we have like branches in different states. In some states, we have only say 4 officers and 5 officers. So if any sexual harassment at that place, will that constitute for that particular area, or it can also be taken care by the head office also?
I think I will need to see what company it is and where our branches are happening. Prima facie for such companies, we have had committees in North Zone, South Zone, East Zone, West Zone, Central Zone. Best case would be that you have separate committees, but if that is not possible for you, you have it zone wise. But you must tell the employees on the intra board of the company that this is where the committee is. And practically, let me tell you, especially post pandemic, you can even have the inquiries done through video conferencing. So even if you're not having an ICC for that particular branch, no problem. The largest office that you have in that zone, you can utilize that committee. The correct word would be adopt that committee in your particular establishment. It should not be a case that you're not having the committee. Even if you're not having a separate committee, you can adopt that committee. You can adopt the regulations of that committee. If you're having offices all across the country, better to have it zone wise. If you're not having all across the country, or if you're having just 4-5 offices across the country, you can have one office where ICC committee you can adopt and utilize. However, it is not advisable, that Kashmir's ICC you are using in Kanyakumari. Kashmir's ICC you may use till Madhya Pradesh or till Rajasthan, Punjab, Delhi. So it is better to have it zone wise. That is what companies normally do.
Okay. So I think this was the last question. In fact, if I can take the opportunity to ask the last question. Okay. The question is, can a women employee directly choose to file FIR with the police under the IPC 1860 instead of making a complaint to the ICC?
Yes, it can definitely do that. And if it does so, then as per the act, the employer has to see there is a difference. What the company is doing, ICC is doing, that's a disciplinary inquiry. And what the court is doing in a criminal court, that's a criminal case. So they are both different. The woman may go there, it may not go there, it can go directly to criminal court also. And if it wants, may not go to ICC, then it can always ask the company to help her with the criminal case also. If she wants, she may not take help of the company for criminal case also. She can always go directly. There is no bar in law. जब तक पॉश एक्ट नहीं था, and there were some incidents like this, तब भी तो women जाके complaints करती थी criminal की. तब there was no POSH Act, there was no system of inquiry apart from what Vishaka stated. So women can always go there. Coming of POSH Act does not mean that she cannot go directly and file a criminal case.
Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed. And Madam Ravi Birbal, thank you for such a wonderful sort of a session wherein you made us understand all the nuts and bolts of POSH. And we are really indebted to you for giving a very, very important presentation. And in fact, judgments that you mentioned, they are all eye openers. The only thing is what we see that in offices, normally, the POSH Act and its various features are not mentioned because we have been visiting many offices. I have seldom seen any office wherein, the important, activities or important parameters related to POSH Act are mentioned on the, the notice board or maybe at the reception. I think that need to be evangelized more, that industry need to be more sensitive towards it, wherein, important principles related to POSH should be, well documented at important places, so that one is it sensitizes and it gives awareness to the women workers, and also it basically acts as a deterrent for others also, so that this cannot be misused. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. I am sure there must be more questions. We'll ask our participants that if there are any more questions, they can directly write to us. I'm sure you all are having our email IDs and our phone number, and then we will try to have our your queries put forth to our domain expert, Mr. Ravi Birbal, for our questions. So last word we can have from Mr. Ashish.
Some questions in the chat box, they can always ask me on the email.
Ji. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Vig, you want to ask anything? Your last note?
No, I think this has been extremely beneficial, extremely good interaction, and I must compliment Ms. Birbal for her in-depth knowledge on the subject. बहुत ही अच्छा लगा आपका सुन के, इतना डिटेल में आपने बताया आज, और I'm sure we as the PhD, as a committee, would like to have your views when we Jitendra, I think we should cover other states अगर Jitendra Gupta जी भी agree करें, क्योंकि इतना important topic है, और जैसे मैंने कहा कि हमको larger section को भी देखना है, and larger section, larger segment, that is where our chamber has a strong point. We cover more than 20 states. हमें जरूर, और मिस बीरबल की तरह हमें और एक्सपर्ट्स को लेके चलना है, वहाँ के एक्सपर्ट्स जो मैंने आज एक सवाल किया, एंड शी वेरी राइटली एंड काइंडली एग्रीड that people working at residences, domestic people, they are also facing such abuse, but unfortunately they don't know where to go. क्या करें, वो कहाँ जाएं, उनके लिए क्या समाधान है? वो बेचारे एक घर से दूसरे घर एक्सप्लॉइट होते जाते हैं, इवेंचुअली नौकरी छोड़ देते हैं, आमदनी नहीं रहती है, तो हमें उनका भी ध्यान करना जरूरी है। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद मिस बीरबल आपका, एंड आप सबको इस प्रोग्राम में आने का बहुत अच्छा लगा। थैंक यू सो मच।
थैंक यू वेरी मच। थैंक यू ऑल ऑफ यू। टेक केयर एंड हैप्पी न्यू ईयर 2020।
हाँ, सबको नया साल मुबारक हो।
थैंक यू जी, टेक केयर, बाय बाय।
बाय बाय।